Robert, thanks for taking some time to chat with us today. Can you give us a couple of minutes on your background, tell you kind of who you are and how you ended up in Poland?
A couple minutes, Hugh. It's a long story. I guess it's a bit of a story. It's serendipity, and you knew me in Canada. And many years ago, in the early '90s, I left briefly from Canada. I'd lost my job with the National Bank of Canada. They found a way to live without me. Got caught up with a big downsizing, and I was inspired by a fellow that I think you knew in Canada, and he encouraged me to go overseas and, as he said, work my rusting soul and do some volunteer work. And that took me to two places. It took me to India, which I ended up in spending 3 months there, and doing some volunteer work in Poland. And that was to be a short-term stint. My background is I'm an accountant. I articled with Price Waterhouse. I worked for two banks in Canada, the Toronto Dominion and the National Bank of Canada. Well, I came to Poland and did the work and was assuming I would be going back after 6 months. And it's a long story, but one thing led to another. And on an incremental basis, I just found myself staying as I got more and more jobs. I met my wife, my Polish wife there. And next thing you know, bingo, you're trapped and you're living in the country permanently. And that's my story. A little different. And I'm now a Polish citizen, not a Polish citizen, but I have a work permit, and Poland is home.
That's great. Well, you've been there through, you've lived in Poland throughout some pretty momentous changes. What are some of the biggest? How has it changed? You got there about 20 years ago. Tell me what's gone on since.
Well, the biggest change, of course, and everyone's aware of this, is the economic growth and progress with unshackling the fetters of communism and freeing themselves. And they did something called shock therapy, where they made a quick transition to the market economy, and did well by it. And of course, the country has grown considerably, and it has a good track record. At one point in the late '90s, it was growing at 5, 6, 7%. Now that's toned off. So it's kind of a hot emerging market. It was called the Tiger of Central Europe. Now, one big change, and Poland's coming into its own. When I was first here, it was kind of perceived as a laggard. The hot areas were the Czech Republic or Hungary. It was getting a lot more attention. And then in the long race to the top, Poland has done very well, to the point where in this recent economic woes in Europe, it's been enjoying positive economic growth, which no other country in Europe has had. So big change there.
Well, actually, that segues nicely into my next question, and that is, how has the country been affected by the crisis in the EU, or what does that look like from your vantage point?
Well, they're obviously not going to be able to avoid the dire consequences of it. They can't because about 40% of their GNP is export oriented. They've become very close to Germany. The Germans, Poland represents a more important market for the German economy than all of Russia, which is a surprising statistic. And if you look out on the street, both our cars are German. And to the extent that Germany's doing well and they've hitched their wagon to Germany, Poland's benefiting from that. But depending on how bad it gets in the EU and just how the crisis shakes out, of course they're going to suffer. Where they've done well is they haven't gone overboard in indebtedness. They have a tight regulatory regime. The banks are sound, if only by virtue that 75% of the banking assets of the country are owned by foreign banks, foreign European banks, with the exception of Citibank. These are all strong, big banks, and they've avoided the banking crisis, and the debt has been kept in line. You put that in the pot with a strong aspirational consumer section, and things are okay. They could be better. The big need is for institutional reforms, improving the court system, changing the laws, all the intangible things. These are very difficult things to change because there's vested interest, number one. Number two, Poles are just used to doing things a certain way. And it's almost part of their culture. even though they may realize that it's when they compare themselves to other countries, it's not the best way to go. They're used to it. And I think the final challenge is it's difficult to get a lot of these reform issues on the political radar screen. It's pretty hard to get up and get elected saying, I want to improve the accounting profession in Poland. Good luck. So that's an enduring challenge for them.
Oh, that's great. And where are the greatest opportunities? Like, where do you see the country? As you look forward 5 or 10 years, what does your crystal ball tell you?
Well, the big opportunities, I think the big strategic opportunities, depending on how things go into the east of us with Ukraine and Belarus and Russia, and those are problematic, difficult situations, is that Poland is on the frontier, the European frontier, and can see itself as the bridge to the east. Uh, but that's a two-edged sword, having countries like that as your neighbor. But if things go well in Russia, particularly, and Ukraine and Belarus, and they're not particularly going well. They're going very poorly in Belarus. It's a dictatorship, and Ukraine is going backwards in many respects. Poland would really get the benefit of that because, in many ways, its eastern opportunities are being dragged down by the situation going on in the east. Um, the other thing that the big breakthrough will happen if the euro still exists in its present form. Poland is obliged under EU rules to someday join it, and when they do join it, we're going to have a massive uplifting. All the foreign exchange risk is going to be eliminated in the Polish zloty. You're going to have even more inbound foreign investment, and then I think there'll be a stronger, more stable economy forward. And barring any cock-ups, any major problems in the rest of the world, and if Poland can continue to reform itself. For instance, right now it's ranked number 62 in the World Bank's index of doing business in the world. Now, 62 is nice place to be. It's not a bad place to be. They could do better. It's better, by the way, than Greece or Italy, interestingly enough. But it's 62 is 62, and there's a lot of other countries in front of the pact, including some of its peer countries in the rest of the EU.
Well, no, that's great, and that's very interesting. I wanted to just take a few minutes today to kind of learn more about what you've been up to and get your point of view from Poland. Robert, thanks for taking time with us today. Sure appreciate it.
Enjoyed it, Hugh. I always enjoy having a chat with you, and I'll look forward to coming back to you when you've got more to say.